Hello, everyone. This is Melissa Lentz. I'm the Director of Education at OSEG, and I'd like to welcome you to our webcast today, during which we will discuss how to bring your policy management process into the 21st century. To navigate compliance effectively in the 21st century, you need 21st century tools. With new rules and updates coming in frequently and rising expectations from regulators, sticking with what's familiar, or tools that have been on our office computers for over 3 decades, is no longer the safe option. But how can organizations adapt to new technologies and make compliance an integral part of their firm's culture? We are pleased you can join us today as our panel of industry experts discuss how you can embrace new technologies and build a sustainable roadmap to tackle your organization's top compliance challenges. Today, we are joined by the following speakers: Freddie Firth, Head of SMB with ClauseMatch; Adil Liaquat, Co-founder and Managing Director at NovaView; Melanie Wright, Director, Strategic Integration, Regulatory Strategy and Delivery, Personal and Commercial Banking at the Royal Bank of Canada; and Cohen Vanderdonk, CEO of Blanco Services. We are very pleased to be joined by our speakers as they discuss how you can embrace new technologies and build a sustainable roadmap to tackle your organization's top compliance challenges. But before we start, I'd like to take a minute to go over a few housekeeping notes. First, regarding continuing education credit. We provide NASBA-approved CPE credit to you for participation in live webinars if you have an OSEG All Access Pass, which you can purchase individually or as part of a company's subscription. The All Access Pass includes many benefits in addition to CPE credit for webcasts, such as access to all OSEG resources and on-demand education series. So if you don't already have a pass, I would encourage you to check it out on the OSEG site. If you do have an All Access Pass and would like a certificate of completion for CPE for this event, please be sure to stay with us for the entire hour and to answer all the polls. These are requirements for receiving CPE credit for this event. And please note, certificates of completion for CPE credit are available only for live events. They are not available for viewing archived webinars. Second, regarding the recording from this webcast. In a couple of days, we will have the recording of this event posted on the OSEG website. Just log into the site, then go to the Webinars tab and select Past Webinar Recordings and then this webcast. This recording may be viewed by anyone for about 1 week, and after this time, the recording may be viewed by anyone with an All Access Pass. Third, regarding upcoming events and activities. Please watch your email for announcements from OSEG about other upcoming webinars. You can view information about these upcoming webcasts on the OSEG site. So today we will address the following learning objectives. We will learn why current solutions like Word, Excel, and SharePoint aren't solving your policy management problems, identify tips to help your organization prove the effectiveness of your compliance programs, and understand how to streamline the process of creating, consulting on, disseminating, and enforcing new rules. But before we hand over the presentation to our speakers, we'd like to offer our first poll question. And again, please be sure to answer this poll if you are interested in receiving CPE credit for this event. So as you're answering this poll, I'd like to hand over the presentation to our speakers to begin our discussion today.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Hello to everyone listening. I'm Freddie Firth, the Head of SMB Sales at ClauseMatch, and welcome to the webinar on how to bring your policy management capability to the 21st century. We have a brilliant panel joining me today on this topic. So first, let's hand over to the guests so that they can introduce themselves. Melanie, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks so much, Freddie. So I'm Melanie Wright, and I have been with RBC for 14 years, 10 and a half of those in the regulatory space. While I didn't grow up at RBC, I did have quite a varied career prior to joining in a variety of industries. And I have found them all to be challenged by regulatory requirements.
Great, Adil.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Freddie, for having me. I have quite a varied background within management consulting, and prior to that within the industries as well. And throughout the career, we have seen organizational challenges regarding the regulatory compliance, the processes, And I have fortunate enough to be part of the organizations where we have supported them in solving and resolving some of those challenges and help them modernize their regulatory landscape.
And finally, Koen.
Thank you very much, Freddie. And also, I'm very happy to be here all the way from Belgium, Brussels. I am a very passionate person about everything that goes around Regtech. I've been writing a book about it a couple of years ago, a new book coming out. But on top of that, I'm also the CEO for international expansion at Blanco. And what we do there, we help wealth managers predominantly to deal with all legislations. So very pleased to be here.
Great. Absolute pleasure to have you all on the panel. It's really nice to have a mixture of partners and fellow Regtechers. So we're going to be able to have a nice different types of views and opinions and insights on the topic. Before we jump straight into some of the learning objectives and start the discussion, I wanted to start what I think is an obligatory question. It's COVID related. So now that the rules and restrictions are easing, what are you most looking forward to doing, or have you been doing outside of work? I don't know who wants to go first. Maybe Adil?
So the restrictions are lifted just a few days ago, and I have had my hands full with a newborn. So have not had the opportunity to enjoy a lot of the things that we were not able to do during the restricted period, but looking forward to going to the favorite restaurants back and hopefully some travel in the mix as well.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
So I'll take you on, Freddie. So to Adil's point, in the Toronto area, our restrictions just lifted to stage 3 less than a week ago. And I'm quite enjoying not having to line up to go grocery shopping. So after nearly 16 months of having to patiently wait in line to be escorted into the grocery store, it's quite nice to just get out of the car and walk right into the store, get what I want, and walk back out. It's the little pleasures in life, right?
No, I completely agree. Although Brits, we actually love queuing. I don't even know why.
But you're very good at it as well.
Yeah, we are.
Disciplined.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Koen?
Yeah, maybe I like to follow up what Melanie was saying. I think that it is part of a bigger ideation, and it's serendipity. I have been missing serendipity. Everything in my life had to be planned, and I'm really looking forward, just as Melanie was saying, just go to the shop whenever you want with who you want. But also in business, I've been missing out on meeting new people, new ideas. It all has been digital, so I'm really looking forward to really meet people in real life.
I agree with that. And I guess I'll go myself, and I've got a very British answer. It's now the pubs are open, get to sit down with friends at the pub, but more importantly, watching all the upcoming Lions rugby games. Cool. Now we've got that out of the way. Let's start with our first learning objective. So why current solutions aren't solving your policy management problems? So I'll give a little bit of context behind that. So generalist business tools such as Word, Excel, email, intranet sites, SharePoint, I think they all definitely have a justifiable place in organizations, and they will carry on having a place in organizations for the foreseeable future. That being said, they also can present challenges for specialist functions, including compliance, risk, governance, and audit. So based on your experiences in the industry, what sort of different approaches do you see? And what are some of the challenges associated with them? Melanie, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. So I think that what's been happening across the globe from a financial institution perspective is the regulations are becoming much more product agnostic. So in the first tranche of regulations, they were specifically focused on specific products and specific business practices. And so you could have your subject matter experts in those lines of business using the desktop available tools to do what they needed to do to ensure that they were complying with what the regulators were requiring or what the regulations were stating. And now with the maturation of the regulations and the growing presence of the regulators across the globe, what's happening is we can no longer rest on the shoulders of a handful of individuals sprinkled throughout the organization. We need to amp it up and have a much broader enterprise view of what's going on and what the connections are and what the requirements are. And so as wonderful as the Microsoft suite of tools or Google suite of tools are, they just don't have the ability to digitally provide the taxonomy required to ensure that not only are we meeting the regulations that exist now, but have the capability of meeting the regulations that are coming.
I completely understand that. And so it's not just a case of regulation affecting individual silos of businesses. It's about how it looks like, how it impacts them as a whole. Adil, what experiences have you had with different projects around challenges on this topic?
Yeah, first of all, I would concur with Melanie that the globalization that has had an effect on international regulations and how all of us need to come together to meet some of those regulations, aside from all the specific country-specific ones. I'll throw, in addition to the Microsoft suite or some of the other collaboration tools, I think some of the other tools are part of the mix as well. So some of the in-house solutions that were built long time ago, some of the other older generation tools who served the purpose very well a decade ago and so forth, but they have not been modernized to meet. And the reason why I say that is there are a lot of changes that are coming in regulations, and we no longer can afford to wait a year or 2 years or even more in some circumstances to go and implement those changes. Now there is that globalization factor, but there is an urgency as well to act quickly on some of those regulations as well. If we are relying upon the tools which are not the right fit for the job, it adds a lot of complications. So complications from timeline standpoint, complications for bringing a lot of different people in the meeting room where they're sitting and discussing the regulations, and that honestly takes way too long. And then back and forth via email. So having a lack of solution where they can objectively discuss, objectively track the regulations, objectively figure out what needs to happen to meet some of those regulations, that seems to be lacking. And that's where the function of the overall, the Regtech or the FinTechs that is coming into the picture is to overcome some of those challenges that are currently seen with the current suite of technologies.
So Koen, why can't we just throw humans at the problem? More and more legal subject matter expertise. They'll get the job done, no?
Well, the answer is yes, but it will come for a price. And I guess that's part of the equation as well, because you want compliance to be an efficient part of your organization too. And I think that's where an interesting thing has happened. Yes, globalization, I totally get it, because nowadays many laws and regulations seem to share the same spirit, but if once the spirit is out of the bottle, then it suddenly is slightly different. So you still need to anticipate. And that's just a little bit difficult if you have a one-directional tool like Excel, because that just is just what you input, it's in there. So you're desperately waiting or hoping for tools that bring much more collaborative tooling in that, or even do interpretation of laws and regulations. So there's a lot of technology that can come in there. But yeah, I think definitely that the time is there to change, partially due to that globalization, and also because it's just the time is there. It's the moment to do it.
Yeah, I mean, at Clause Match, we recognise sort of the current way of doing things and the potential for a future way of doing things. And we describe the current way of doing things as static and siloed. So, everything is being managed individually and the information is hard to interact with. The future state is collaborative and dynamic. How can that information actually be dynamically related to one another, and how can you actually manage it in a way which multiple stakeholders in a complex workflow can interact with all of that information. So
maybe Freddie, I just want to add something, just very short and brief, because I also think that, well, globalization is one point, but at the same time, let's be honest, when we had the crisis in 2008, it also was a very hard job for compliance to cope with business. So we should also really throw a lot of flowers to the compliance people, because they saved the industry. They just made it happen. And they were really busy solving the problem. And now we are so many years later, and they didn't have the time to reflect. And that's something that I see very often in the industry, is that people that were in compliance, that have been really working hard, but they did not see, like some of the others did, like the innovation people, they did not really see what innovation has already brought to the industry. So there is an opportunity also for compliance people just to open the door and really look what's out there, because a lot of things have changed over the last 10, 15 years.
It's a very good point, but it also poses a challenge for the compliance person, because more often than not, the compliance officer, the department, the function have never bought technology before, which makes for a daunting experience because it's the unknown. I guess this is a question for anyone who wants to go first, but what steps would you recommend to someone or to a bank, to a function, to a compliance officer who's looking to first understand what their problems are and then actually ultimately identify what the relevant solution is to that problem?
So I can take this on first. So I think the hardest challenge is to identify what the problem is. What is it that we are trying to solve? A lot of the times what happens is that we get so busy in our day-to-day life that becomes a normal. And once that becomes normal, it is very hard to get out of it and look at it objectively, that what are our challenges? Now, the good part is the folks who have been doing this for a long time, they are very well aware of what the challenges are. It is just a matter of bringing them forward. So a couple of examples there would be that if you are working on a particular regulation and you're finding that it is taking you a year just to identify what do you need to do with that regulation, well, that is a problem. If you are facing a challenge where you believe that you have to work with 3 different lines of defense and each one of them have their own solutions, that is a problem. If in order to just give a single answer that are we meeting the requirements of any one regulation, then there are plenty of regulations out there to discuss. And in order to help answer that one question, you have to bring a lot of people in the meeting room and go through paperwork and Excels to answer it. Well, that is a problem. So I think these are all the problems that you need to put objectively on the table and see if this is what we are doing today. Are there opportunities to streamline some of those things, to bring in various different sorts of efficiencies, whether they are cost efficiencies, whether they're operational efficiencies, whether they are your timeline efficiencies, whether they are responding back to your regulators and auditors in a much more effective way so that nothing kind of slips in the whole process. These are all the opportunities which are out there and which are very much shared across many financial institutions and beyond, and other industries as well. I think that is the starting point to identify the problem. And then I think when we are looking at the solution, that's a whole different ballgame as well. A lot of the times, there are so many different solutions and tool sets out there. What to choose, how to identify that the solution is right set for you. And more often than not, what I have seen is clients focusing on the buzzwords. Oh, does it have the machine learning? Does it have the AI? Yes, that's perfect. Is it cheap? Oh, fantastic. Let's just go and deploy it. But they tend to miss a lot of the other key contributing factors in your decision making. And the way I look at it, there are 4 or 5 key things that you got to take a look at. First of all of it has to start from your challenges and the problems that you're facing, what your requirements are. Obviously, the vendors can help you polish some of them, but you have to have those baseline challenges identified. The second thing becomes the technology that the vendor offers or the solutions offer. Is it aligned with your corporate strategy? Are you looking into more modern cloud-based solutions? Are you looking into more on-prem type work? What are the technical capabilities that the solution is offering? The third thing that becomes very important is you got to take a look at the vendor's market standing. Who are their partners? Who are their clients? If they are more into the Regtech type environment, do they have the seed funding? Who is providing that seed funding? How many awards in the industry that they have won? The fourth thing that I will mention in there is understanding the support operations or the support capabilities that vendor can provide you. Are they going to be around 6 months from now? Do they have folks on the ground to help you implement some of those solutions? If there are any challenges, are they able to help you resolve those challenges? You got to take a look into that very closely. And then the last thing where it comes the cost. And you have to take a look at and consider not only the licensing cost, which is often the case that folks look at, but you got to take a look at a total cost of ownership, which includes licensing, which includes your support cost, which includes your training cost, which includes if you're going to implement it internally, how many people are you going to take to implement? And from timeline standpoint, what is it going to take from total cost of opportunity standpoint as well? And once you bring all of those 5 components together, that gives you a holistic view. So not to get daunted, there is a good news. The good news is all of the vendors that are out there, they can help you out. All of the consulting companies that are out there that you may be partnering up with, they can help you out. And don't be shy to ask the vendors for demos of their products, to conduct a short proof of concept where they can use your requirement, they can use your data, and you can test it out from the standpoint whether it is going to meet your needs or not. And most of the times, those proof of concepts are not very time intensive or very cost intensive. So when you're looking at it all, I think these are some of the recommendations and suggestions that I can provide to folks.
Brilliant framework and very clear and concise. I think from my point of view, it's also really important that the vendor, when you're speaking to them, you have confidence that they can almost hold your hand through that process. It should be a bit of a concern if they don't know what they should be doing and taking you through that sort of validating requirements, being able to prove and evidence them, bring the relevant stakeholders together for approval and push that through into finally the procurement process. A hallmark for success of a vendor should be that the vendor should be able to provide that service for you. Melanie, from your experience working in the bank, always being surrounded by the operational challenges, the regulatory challenges, how in your head did you prioritize what the key problem was and how you wanted to solve it?
So I think I want to leverage a point that Cohen made a few minutes ago and then piggyback on what Adil talked about. So Cohen mentioned the credit crisis of 2008. And I know for a fact that organizations, we really moved quickly and, with all hands on deck to start solving the problems and the gaps that arose as a result of that credit crisis. And we've gotten to the point where, organizations are great at identifying what our strengths are. We're not so great at focusing on our limitations and therefore how to solve for those limitations. So I think what happens is we need to start assigning an opportunity cost to those limitations. And once you identify and start to bring to the forefront what your limitations are, and to Adil's point of the siloing and the need to understand what you're solving for, you can only do that if you clearly identify your limitations. And once you bring those to the forefront and start assigning the costs of those continued limitations, then you begin to be very clear about what your needs are and what it's going to take to achieve those needs. And yes, we can keep throwing more people at it, but that's not an efficient way to solve a lingering limitation. So identifying what we're great at, bueno, we all do that and we do it every day. But starting to spend some time on those, what I call the lingering limitations, is really where you begin to get the benefit of understanding what not only what's needed for the now, but what's needed for the future. Because, you know, what happened in 2008 and the, you know, all of the regulations and the expectations that came out of 2008, we're just seeing more and more of that. And my feeling is that once we, you know, once COVID is in the rearview mirror, there's going to be more regulations linked to the kinds of experiences that we're having across the globe now that are, you know, are just starting to emerge. So again, it's identifying those lingering limitations and really putting those forward as this is what we need to solve for now in order to make us even better at what we already know we're good at.
I agree, because I feel that there's somehow mindset that also comes into the picture. It's for the second line to be a little bit more first line, and that's scary sometimes, because they will need to come up and they'll have to find own solutions for problems that they face, and that was traditionally not what was asked from a second line, because they were just undergoing regulations and providing advice forwards. And I think also for the first line, let's be honest, they also have a mindset change, because for this to happen, it needs to be the case that the first line does not see compliance as a ticks the box mentality, because as long as that is the case, no change will be put into place. So I think that the key element here is collaboration, and collaboration is a scary thing at the same time, because Adil was giving a nice framework about going out there and looking at the startup and see if they're still there in 6 months. Oh my God, that's very difficult for a startup to prove that you're still there in 6 months, because as soon as you give your financial balance and the bank looks at it, then you get 0 points out of 10. You have no way to talk. So I do believe that the industry has a bigger thing to solve too, and that's also about collaboration. And that's, to me, what I understand about that is that since 2008, to come back on the crisis, the regulator asked a tremendous amount of data from the banks or from the industry. And today, it still applies that if a bank runs, for example, anti-money laundering checks on a big set of data and they find something, you can imagine that if you run the same tool, but on a bigger data set, which is held by the regulator, you're probably more likely to find better results. And I think at the end of the day, it should be the industry that have the objective to anticipate that there's no fraud in our system. And that means collaboration between not just the Regtechs, the banks, but also the supervisors. So I think, yeah, Regtech is one thing, but SupTech is the next one.
Absolutely. And I guess this transitions quite nicely into the next topic, which is ultimately about you understand your problems, you have prioritized them, but how do you actually build a compelling business case internally, not to just hire new people? Oh, we've got to do a poll first. Okay, let's do the poll. So let's do the poll quickly. So this is for the audience. So we've got a poll on our organization's compliance transformation program is A, just beginning, B, in place but not embedded, C, a mature program but needs improvement, D, we have everything under control. Be interested to see who answers that one. And E, I don't know. Okay, so while you guys are giving your answers, we'll move on to the next topic. Great, perfect. So what I was about to move into was talking about, so if we understand our problems, they've been prioritized, and we have an idea of the direction we want to go, how do you also go about building a compelling business case that will actually get approvals, not just from maybe your local function, but all levels of the business? And maybe a good starting point is we can double click on Adil's point about one of the first responses will be, well, we have an in-house solution for that. What would be your response, Adil?
Well, the in-house solution is working perfectly fine. Why are we going to change it? And I think most of the time that's the response you're going to get. And I think that's where you got to start building out that business case and start presenting and providing an update. Look, it is not working perfectly fine. We have been firefighting for the last 10, 15, 20 years. We are going by doing it more on a tactical basis. But as we're getting into more and more regulatory challenges and requirements, we gotta modernize. And it is not an easy thing to do. Anytime you're asking for money and every time you're asking for large sums of money, it becomes a challenge based on the competing priorities. The good news is everybody understands regulation and regulatory requirements are mandatory. There is no way around it. So when we're looking at more regulatory type projects, the funding is a little bit easier to come by as opposed to some of the other initiatives. What do we need to make sure we are building within those business cases? Again, the objective information, calling out what I was mentioning earlier, what those challenges are, providing realistic baselines on what those things are today. If we are looking at any specific problem, how long is it taking us to solve? How much is it costing us? And the cost not only from those older system upgrades and maintenance and migrations and data and upkeep and keeping the lights on standpoint, but also keeping in mind how many people are we throwing at the overall process when they would be doing a lot more value add work rather than combining 20, 50 different Excel sheets and manually looking at it. And then I think going forward, when we start talking about the benefits that could come out of it, I think some of those should be realistic as well. Like we don't want to be saying, okay, we are going to get 90% efficiencies out of the solution or out of any given process. I think those numbers need to be a little bit more realistic. In some situations, there may be 90% gains, but they need to be very well backed up as well. When we are putting the business case together, I think it should take into consideration both qualitative and quantitative aspects into the picture. And I think once that solid business case is prepared, it has a much better chances of getting approvals than not. And what I will also want to emphasize is a lot of the times, and it is totally fair, you know your problems, you know the benefits that you would like to get out of any specific solution. But tap on the shoulders of the vendors and consultants that you're working with. Why? Because they may have implemented any given solution, or they may have tackled this problem at 10 other clients as well. So they may have those realistic examples and realistic sample set to see, okay, we were able to do the similar thing in a similar situation. And as an outcome of that, this is what we were able to achieve, to give you a little bit more credibility in some of those future looking benefits and assumptions as well.
Oh, that's absolutely a great point. It reminds me actually of an essay. Not that I often read essays, but I read an essay by Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of Slack, yesterday actually, and I'd recommend you all reading it. It's called "We Don't Sell Saddles," and it was an essay that he wrote to the organization on the difficulty they were having on positioning their solution in the market. And that was because what a lot of the organization was doing when they were selling the software was they were talking more about just cost savings and functionality and AI. And the whole essay and the piece is around, well, actually, what's the real outcome of implementing this solution? What's the wider benefit in terms of its transformation strategic objectives? And how will it actually help an organization get from A to B? And I think that's really important in a business case, rather than just talking about, some of the pure cost saving numbers. It's more about, well, how does this fit as a small piece of a bigger puzzle? I don't know if that resonates with either yourself, Cohen, or Melanie.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here nodding, and what I'm thinking is that any solution needs to solve for today's complexities, but it also needs to solve for the coming complexities that we may or may not even be aware of. And I think that's where the airtight business case talks about, okay, this is where we're at today. This is what we're facing right now, but here's what we know is coming, or here's what we believe is coming, and we don't have the ability to face those complexities. And it reverts back to what I said a few minutes ago about the siloed positioning of regulatory compliance that has existed up until now. And we've basically been there, done that. We've solved for all of those in the individual business silos. And now it's being amped up to be across lines of business with client-centric requirements that doesn't matter what products that client has. Well, we need to be able to break down those complexities and cross over across many of those lines of business and get moving. And we can't take a year to do it, to Adil's point. We need the collaboration, to Cohen's point, and we need the tools to help us along that way, because we've done all the heavy lifting we can do with throwing more and more people at it. So understanding those complexities now and what those complexities are going to look like in the future.
Pretty much sounds as a digital transformation, right? That for some other departments within the bank industry already went through. But I was thinking about the stages of learning, and it starts with unconscious incompetence. You have to get out of that. So I guess everyone needs to become an entrepreneur and really gets out, see what's in the markets, be interested about what's happening around you, what solutions are out in the market, and reflect and maybe try to implement. Because what I've seen within the banks, none of the banks really likes the Microsoft stack. Because I've been in several banks, and all of them, they say, but hey, Microsoft Excel not supported, guys, not supported. And I've seen amazing tools built on Microsoft stack, but then when it really was to the point, then IT was always saying, no, not supported. So if you can make a really good case, which comes back to a basic business case as a startup, as an entrepreneur, then I think you've got a chance. And you have to be willing to face also some of the challenges within the bank, because many of the Regtech tools will be in the cloud. And having or introducing a cloud solution within a bank is already a challenge on its own. But it starts with really willing the drive to make it happen. And I think that's something that you see much more within the compliance region, that we all seem to be waking up and really starting to be very excited about the possibilities that are out there in the industry.
Well, I agree with everything you've been saying, and the only thing that I would add is the people part. It's all well and good having nice shiny technology, but it also requires the right people, both on the vendor side, but also the buyer side, i.e. the client or the partner, to actually want to make the change happen. So I think coupled with a good business case also requires change management, especially when we're talking around the enterprise, large financial institutions. It's all well and good that we've now got a piece of technology implemented, but is it actually on the laps of the people who are supposed to use it? Do they know how to use it? And more importantly, are they willing to use it? These are all things that also need to be considered. And
isn't it the big? Yeah, sorry, Freddie, go.
No, please go.
No, I was thinking, is it not the bigger question that you need to provide comfort to the business, that also with the tools in the future you can actually make sure you do exactly what you do today? And that's the real fear of the first line, because they say, oh, it's nice to have nice tools, and you try AI, oh yeah, let's go on the playground, let's play with the sand and the sandbox. But what they're really concerned about is that they actually apply and they don't end up in jail because something goes wrong in the company. So I think that's also a little bit of a game that needs to be played and played smartly. So therefore, entrepreneurs in the company.
Yeah. And Friday, just one more thing, totally agree with Melanie and Cohen, what you were just suggesting. And Friday, around people, I think when we're looking at people, that is at the core of anything and everything that you do. You may have technologies, you may have shiny objects, you may have everything, but it's the people who are running all of that. And And change management, absolutely, the training aspects, how would you implement, how would you bring people on board, all of that comes into the picture at the right time. But I think you have to bring the people along with you on a ride from the very get-go of it. If you're starting to analyze a solution, bring your partners along. As we have all been suggesting, that collaboration, that needs to be the key. Bringing down silos between your layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 of defenses. I think you got to take a look at it holistically, that how can we all work together, maybe on the one solution, maybe you don't need 3 different solutions for 3 different lines of defenses. Maybe it is one solution where you're working, but how are you going to bring down that barrier if you are bringing all of those parties along with you on the ride from the very get-go? Even when you're doing vendor demos, let's do that together. When you're working on a business case, seek their input in terms of what their challenges are that they're facing and how can you resolve. Give them an update that this is what you're facing and thinking from the overall capability standpoint, let alone any given tool or solution standpoint. And I think that has a much better probability of meeting needs from an organizational standpoint rather than one specific team standpoint. It has a much better chance of getting approvals for those business cases and moving forward along together as well.
Yes, no, I completely agree. I'm tempted to go into the next learning objective, but first let's go to the next slide and see if there's another poll or not. Okay, no, there's not. Tips to help your organization improve the effectiveness of your compliance program. So I'm going to leave that there and see if anyone wants to answer now. And then after that, I'm going to provide a bit more context. But has anyone got any tips to help your organization prove the effectiveness of your compliance programs?
I think it's yeah, go ahead, Melanie. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Cohen. I'm just going to be very cheeky and say, yes, you wait for the final review that comes from the regulator after they've done it.
That's like a mic drop moment.
Well, yeah, what else can we say then, right?
Exactly. Okay, over to Adil and Cohen to pick the mic up.
Yeah, I personally believe it's not so difficult. It's no different than another business case that you're running. It's you make strong KPIs from the beginning, and you be honest with those KPIs. If you can show that you do things better and you're still compliant, which you will only know at the end of the ride, which is scary in a way. But if that's what it is, then you've got yourself a very proven system that is effective at the end of the day. Don't know how you see that differently, Adil?
Yeah, no, on the same page, I think I'll just add 2 things to it. One, it is knowing along the way that you're doing the right things, and having that delta between what you submitted and what you got back. And if that delta keeps on shrinking time over time, that is a proof of your effectiveness as well. And the second thing, I think having that confidence at any given time that I'm compliant, and getting that confidence through an objective measure, as Cohen was mentioning before, having your KPIs set up, having your processes set up. But at the end of the day, if I am an internal auditor, let's forget about the externals for a second. And internal auditors comes and say, show me everything that you have on AML. Are you meeting all the regulations at any given time? And for you to have that ability on the click of a button to show them, this is what I have. I think that is the effectiveness that I would vouch for going forward for any organization to have.
Amen. Yeah, amen to that. But it makes an interesting point. Do you feel that maybe the regulator should be more involved in supporting the adoption of Regtech?
Absolutely. I think as Cohen was mentioning before, all the supervisors, all the regulators, like we are living in a time now that this is not you do your job and I do my job. Like we are all in this together. If you're fighting AML, it's not that my bank is fighting AML and you're not. I think this is a global problem or a global challenge in which we are all in it together. So the more we can talk to each other, the more we can collaborate with each other, the better we are going to get. So when we're looking at regulators, and I think, as they say, charity begins at home. I think all of the FIs, all of the organizations who are meeting or working on one regulation of the other, I think we got to start looking at that internally, that how can we bring down some of those silos internally and start working together. And then in a parallel approach, we can work with the regulators as well. It goes to adoption of Regtech, it goes to adoption of more, excuse me, innovative solutions where some of these things and capabilities come out of the box rather than you have to work a lot more to bring it in. I think once some of those, we get ahead of some of those challenges internally, I think it is going to be much more easier to work a lot more collaboratively with your external partners as well.
Okay, so if there's no other answers on this part, I think we may have a poll question. We currently have a solution in place to manage our policy management, regulatory change, or regulatory change management. The answers will be yes, no, or I don't know.
Or it could be if we have many.
Yes,
solutions.
or that. Yes, it's funny you say that, because there was a client we were speaking to more recently who had 10 different portals for their policies, all owned by different functions. So let that one sink in. Imagine sorry, I was just saying, imagine the login credentials to get into each of those different portals.
And I was about to say, now we're going to have the magic moment because I see artificial intelligence on the slide. Finally.
Yeah.
The magic solution to all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I won't actually mention that. I just want to check, we haven't got any seed questions first. Or shall we talk straight? Should we go to the next slide, please? Okay, great. So I guess it would be silly not to talk about clause match, but I guess before we do that, maybe I'll just do a little bit of a recap, what we've been talking about, maybe some of my key takeaways, and feel free to add in afterwards. I think the first takeaway for me was that generalist tools do have a place in business. However, specialist functions that require more complex processes, workflows, stakeholder interactions, they require more specialist tools. Secondly, I guess some of the reasons for this is that current ways of working in policy management or regulatory change, those current ways of working, they're more time consuming with administrative tasks. There's silos across businesses. And along with that, there's a lack of traceability, knowledge sharing, and collaboration. Thirdly, and I guess with the former in mind, it's important to understand of those challenges, which ones are priorities, so that can help you with your decision making when you want to start choosing potential regtechs. And then finally, with the previous learning objective, it's about capturing what was your previous state and what is now your post state, and using both quantitative and qualitative metrics, as Adil mentioned, to be able to understand what the measurement of effectiveness is. So there were my key takeaways. I really, really enjoyed this panel discussion. I thought the insights were absolutely brilliant. I don't know if anyone wants to add some final comments before I introduce clause match. Okay, perfect. So it is silly not to mention clause match. I'm not going to be talking about artificial intelligence, so don't worry about that. But if any of the challenges in today's discussion resonated with anyone listening today, please do not hesitate to contact me, or at least request more information on the website. Just a quick introduction to clause match. We're an award-winning regulatory technology company. We focus on solving key challenges in the policy management and regulatory change space. We have lots of experience working across both enterprise and SMB. And so irrespective of where you are on your compliance journey, we would welcome the opportunity to sit down with you, understand your priorities, and learn how we can assist you. So that's everything from me. I just want to say thank you again to the panel, and also to everyone who's listened. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to hopefully having you on our next webinar. Okay, so we have some questions that have come through from the audience, and so we'll read out a few of them, and we can have a go at trying to answer them. So the first one is, what are some of the tips to look for in policy management and regulatory change management solutions? What are some of the tips? Okay, so this was written a bit strangely. So I'm guessing what it's asking is, what are some of the tips in selecting these types of solutions?
I see Melanie and Adil thinking, so I may go first. I think it all starts with really going out there. And during the conversation, we said it's important to have clear what is the problem you want to resolve, and then go and search for these solutions and really meet the vendors. Don't be scared about the vendors. Invite them, watch and learn.
Yeah, Freddie, and what I would add there is, I think we did talk about having those having those problems that you want to get at. Some of them identified. I did provide some sort of a framework as well that you could take a look at. I think if the question is around how to identify rather than select, I think that is a little bit of a different question. So doing an industry scan, as Kun mentioned, obviously that is your first step at it. Become knowledgeable in the industry, what is out there, and do a little bit of your homework on it. The good news today is the blessings of the internet. All the information is out there. Even if you do a quick Google, you will get a lot of information on it. You can take a look at Gartner's Magic Quadrants as well. They provide a good starting point too. Take a look at some of the awards ceremonies that happen around the fintechs and regtechs. They could provide a little bit of an information as well. So I'll steal Kun's point around becoming an entrepreneurial. I think that's what it will take as a starting point. See what is out there in the market, shortlist some of the things that you think can fulfill your need, and right after that, all of your the selection process and criteria and a framework that I mentioned earlier. I think that could be leveraged to make the right choice.
So I come at it from a slightly different angle, and I always go into these things with a start skeptical mindset. So if you know exactly what your problems are and what you are going to need to start resolving those problems, then a good place to start is be skeptical and don't let the shiny objects distract you. So there are a lot of companies who can put on an amazing demonstration that would rival the best magic shows on the planet. But you need to be able to peel away the layers and ensure that there's actual substance there behind those shiny object shows. And if you know what your needs are, you can start asking key questions like, what are the backgrounds of the people that are working in these companies? Because if they have a solid product, they've learned that in the trenches. And those learnings should be represented in the people that have been foundational to building those companies. So I think that's key is, and not everybody appreciates this, but take a skeptical view. Go in expecting nothing, and then ask the right questions and be pleasantly surprised that, hey, they really do understand your needs. They really do understand your business and where it's going. And then you can start that partnership and that collaboration. But if you go in, already planning to be thrilled, you're probably not going to be as articulate about what you're looking for.
Good point.
So we'll go through one more question. We may have time for a third one, but the second one is, we're an SMB, so a small to medium-sized business. Are solutions out there to accommodate a small company? I'll take this one, and then feel free to add your comments. I think when we're looking at small to medium-sized businesses, especially regulated ones, I mean, the one common denominator between SMB and enterprise, irrespective of the size of the organization, is that you're regulated, you have regulatory requirements, you have policies, procedures, probably risks that you have to mitigate, and you have to govern them well. And so with that, irrespective of the size of the organization, you're probably doing it in a very similar way, irrespective of what size you are. And therefore, by using technology, you can become more efficient, you can become more effective, you can mitigate risks by using technology. And you're not limited by having to just be a big organization to buy Regtech.
Absolutely. And what I would also add is, I think just being a small to medium business, you may have a little bit more agility in adopting some of these solutions as well, because there will be less number of stakeholders, there will be lesser requirements, not from regulation standpoint, but from internal organizational standpoint that you may have to meet to get through all of those processes and getting approvals as well. So what I would say is the regulations are applied the same, but adoption of some of those modern technologies that serve your purpose, your road to adoption and timeline to adoption might be a little bit faster.
And I would add to that, because also a lot of fintechs and unicorns and scale-ups, they don't have the legacy technology systems that have to be ripped out, or at least people, you know, are screaming and throwing their toys out the pram because they want to hold on to them. You've got a lot of green land to work on, and normally in a business with a culture where technologies are more easily adopted.
I personally believe it's the moment for the SMEs to thrive, because it's interesting to see that software as a service is being applied within the banks. And one of the common things about software as a service is that it's one and the same software. So if you have a bank using the software that you're using and you're just a small SME, but still regulated, having to apply with the same regulations, you have a lot more trust that what you do is the right thing because you're guided by the big guys. So I do think there is an opportunity, and also because you go SaaS, the price of delivering the service becomes a lot less. And what I see working at Blanco, I really see that a lot of these wealth managers, they are not aware that tools such as us exist that can really help them throughout the complete journey. And we know what the journey is because we are out of that industry. They believe that technology solutions are only there for the big fishes. But nowadays, it's really common and it can be used and addressed by everyone. So big opportunity.
Definitely agree. I think we've got time for one more question. What internal resources are needed to get a compliance or regulatory technology project up and running? I'm sure all of you have got experience with this, probably some challenges, but also some recommendations.
So you need people that are not only have a broad knowledge base, but willing to roll up their sleeves and collaborate. So this is an opportunity to shine a light on where the future is, both, you know, not only now, but what's coming. And I think that in the world of banks and to some degree wealth managers, where we are in fact weighed down by the legacy systems and by old ways of doing things. So one of the successes to moving forward in this environment is getting people that have a broad knowledge of the processes, what's expected from the regulators, what our compliance partners are seeking, what are quick wins from a compliance perspective, and being able to roll those up to be your first out of the gate and your fast followers.
Absolutely, I think you're right on, Melanie. People. That's what drives it. And I think when we're looking at some of those people, absolutely, they need to be able to roll up their sleeves. They need to be able to be knowledgeable and great collaborators with the vendors as well. But on top of that, they have to be really good communicators, because they are the ones who are going to be working internally and becoming your champions of this new way of thinking and this new technologies, the new mindset that are going to come along with the more modern solutions. They are the ones who are going to be helping to build those business cases as well. So I think when we're looking at the folks who are great communicators, the process becomes much easier. And then one last thing that I would also suggest, which is also a subcategory of people too, it is you have got to have a champion within an organization. If you do not have that champion, no matter how good collaborators you are or how good communicators you are, things are not going to move forward, or at least not with the speed that you would like it to be. So if you're working on some of these initiatives within an organization, make absolute sure you have a champion who has the authority to drive things and influence their peers within the organization as well. That's the key to success too.
I like to add all of the above, but it's the above that also needs to follow. What I mean by this is that we have been giving tips for people within compliance to step up and to make it happen, but it's also for management to create an environment that is open for change. If that doesn't happen, then you'll have initiatives, but they will disappear if they have no support from management. So it takes two to tango.
And what a way to wrap up the end of the webinar. I just want to say thank you again to all of you guys and the panel for speaking. The insights have been absolutely brilliant, and I've also learned a lot. And also thank you to everyone who's listened in. Hopefully everyone can join us on our next webinar. Cheers.
Great. Thank you so much to our speakers for joining us today to discuss how we can embrace new technologies and build a sustainable roadmap to tackle an organization's top compliance challenges. And to our audience, please take a few minutes to fill out the closing survey about today's event. We truly value your input and suggestions. We'd love to have you join us for other upcoming OSEG events. Please watch out for emails regarding future webinars. This concludes our webcast today. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.